I imagine, I've seen the statement coming from the ANC, but also I imagine on behalf of the committee, you welcome today's ruling.
We noted and welcome the ruling, and we believe that is part of the deepening and entrenchment of our constitutional democracy.
But are you reflecting on the processes and you know, what led to this particular point where you had the Constitutional Court once again having to stand and sort of fill the gap where perhaps it seems there were failures on the side of the executive?
You know, the essence of a constitutional democracy is that the judiciary must test the validity of acts of parliament and executive acts, and that's the guarantee that helps us to ensure that there are no abuses of power, and because no one is beyond reproach. So we don't see this as a crisis, we see this as the normal development of a constitutional democracy, and that's why we fully accept it.
So I see that you note and welcome the judgment, Dr. Mathole Motshekga, but I'm just wondering, that is that enough? Do you not have anything to say about the kind of conduct that was found by the Constitutional Court here? Because it's quite damning of them to say the things that they said, particularly of the conduct of the former president, Jacob Zuma, and the blame that is also shouldered by Mxolisi Nxasana, the former NDPP. Surely that must concern you, that, you know, in the eyes at least of the Constitutional Court, there was inducement for him to leave office, and he was willing to accept that. You must be able to say more than saying you welcome and note it.
For us, what is important is that we must remedy the defects in the law, and the Constitutional Court has called on us to remedy the defects, and that's what we're going to focus on, and not focus on you know, what individuals do, the motives of individuals, because we want to ensure that the law that are made by Parliament are laws which do not open gaps for abuse by people who hold office.
Have you applied your mind to how exactly you start to remedy those defects, particularly that section 12.6, I think it is, of the NPA Act, which basically, in a way, sort of talked to the security of tenure in office of the NDPP, particularly in relation to the president, who has the power, as things stand, to suspend the NDPP without pay for a prolonged period of times?
You know, I'm not a law on myself. My committee will be meeting on Wednesday, and then I'll consult with the colleagues in the committee and decide how we move forward in consultation with all the relevant stakeholders, and of course we have to take society on board.
So in reaction to what has come out of the Constitutional Court, there have been calls, and they're not new really, these have been made before, for the appointment of the NDPP, the National Director of Public Prosecutions, to sort of follow a similar process to the process of the appointment of the Public Protector and boards such as the SABC, where Parliament plays more of a role. Because, you know, as some have remarked, that when we crafted the Constitution, perhaps there was a sense to sort of defer to then President Nelson Mandela, but a president is not a perfect person, even as they perform these constitutional functions. What is your thinking around that call for Parliament to get more involved, as opposed to the situation now where the president appoints the NDPP?
Now, my view is that we shouldn't lead office bearers into temptation. There must be enough checks and balances so that wrongly or rightly we don't find appointing authorities having done things and later getting accused as having had the intention to abuse power. So I'm sympathetic to that view, but as I say, I'm not a law unto myself, and we will discuss the matter when it's tabled before the committee.
So you're sympathetic to the view that says perhaps Parliament should play a bigger role?
Should reconsider that position,
Yeah. So it's something that you as a person who's a leader in that structure in Parliament would support?
I would support that the matter be tabled again, because at the end, this is a developing democracy. We want to deepen and entrench it, and as Parliament, we must always be prepared to do everything that will make sure that this constitutional democracy stands on firm grounds.
Let me ask you, as a leader of the ANC now, if I ask you to wear that hat for a moment, how ashamed are you that this could happen on your watch, that your deployee to the presidency, former President Jacob Zuma, could, engage in the kind of behavior that was found by the Constitutional Court today? This is the highest office in the land, entrusted with all these institutions, including the National Prosecuting Authority, which should perform its work without fear or favor. But as we've seen from the judgment, the behavior was, was not the kind of behavior you'd want to see the bearer of a constitutional office engage in. How ashamed are you as a leader of the ANC?
The ANC believes that no one is infallible, and that's why we've established an integrity commission to ensure that in future, when we deploy people to high office, we deploy people who will not bring the organization and the country into disrepute. So this is a learning curve.
Do you accept that this happened? You're calling it a learning curve. Do you accept that this bringing the organization and the country into disrepute actually happened?
I don't want to add to what the court said. I think the court said a mouthful, and we noted and we accept fully the decision of the court, and we are going to speedily revise the legislation in question.
I'll tell you why I'm asking, Dr. Motshekga. I'm asking because, many people will say that as the conduct of the former president, kept coming up from time to time, it was the ANC that shielded him. When the issue on Nkandla was concerned, in as far as his failure to live up to his constitutional obligations there, you defended him. When Omar al-Bashir was allowed to leave the country and the court said what it said, you were there still to defend him. And now we are seeing behavior that basically says one of the key institutions of the justice system was under threat. I mean, if the NDPP can be induced to leave office, there's no bigger threat than that. And I'm just wondering, to what extent do you as the ANC shoulder the responsibility for protecting him in that behavior?
As the ANC, we did not defend the president as an individual. We said that the judiciary itself was not sure whether or not the remedial action of the public protector is binding and enforceable, because the Western Cape Court said something else, the Supreme Court of Appeals said something else. Until the matter was settled by the Constitutional Court, we said now there's legal certainty, we're going to go that route. So the ANC was not defending anybody. The ANC was simply saying the law itself, it's open to different interpretations, and the courts themselves had not yet settled the matter. And then in the case of al-Bashir, the matter was dealt with by the executive and not by Parliament. And then we, as the ANC, we do not dictate to the executive. We deploy people to the executive, but also as Parliament, we respect the separation of powers, and that's how a constitutional democracy should work.